Hey everybody, Jyotsna here, and my students like to call me Coach Joe. I have a very special person. I mean, he's my mentor and he's like the best tutor in the world. I can vouch for it because my son goes to him and he mentors my younger son in SAT and ACT. And Clark and his wife Jeannie have a very, very unique approach to like coaching for SAT and ACT, and I thought I should share my best resource with you guys. So today, Clark will speak about the digital SAT, where students struggle, how to address all the problems that students encounter during the test and everything. So welcome, Clark.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
It's my pleasure to demystify everything because it's pretty mysterious what it is that they're doing. But if you know what to look for, I can actually tell you exactly all the changes that have been made. So first and foremost, looking at just the general changes, what do we have? The ACT is still going to be paper and pencil. The digital SAT, you're going to be taking it on a device, and there's different devices you can use. You can do it on an iPad. You can do it on your Chromebook. You're going to have to download Blue Book software. That's from the College Board website. But then what's going to happen that's going to be really different is that obviously you're going to be using your mouse, you're going to be using your computer screen, and you're going to be writing things down on scratch paper. You don't get to keep any of the scratch paper, obviously, because then you could take that with you. But the way things are going to happen is they present things to you, and on the one side, you can click an answer choice to select it. And on the other side of that answer choice, you can click something where you can do process of elimination, which will then cross off those answer choices. You can also do some interesting things with digital, which is you can highlight text and you can then cross it off, or you can just leave it highlighted. You can go back and forth between questions. You can mark which questions you want to return to. So you've actually got some interesting features there. And one of the things that I think a lot of people like is that there's going to be an online calculator. It's going to be something similar to what's called a Desmos. If you do not know what that is, you can look it up. It's an online graphing calculator. So the kids can put in a formula and then they can actually see it graphed on their screen. They can also do things, which is there's a clock there, and you can actually turn the clock off if it really bothers you or makes you nervous, and so you can hide it, although it will still give you a warning when you're getting close to your time. Meanwhile, one of the other differences is that it's split into basically only two sections of each category. So first, you're going to have reading and writing, and then you're also going to have another reading and writing, which is going to be Module 1 and Module 2. Now, these modules are not going to be long as the 4 sections that we used to have on the SAT. The entire SAT is about an hour shorter. Now, one of the things that they've done is they've actually given us more time in the math, but they've given us less time on the verbal. And what they're doing in the verbal is first, you have a module. Everyone who is taking that test is going to be taking that same module. You go through all of the same questions. Everybody's going to be taking the same questions. And then when that is over, your next section, Module 2, is going to be compiled by AI, whatever their learning algorithm it is that they want to use. And then that is going to be based on how well you did in Section 1. So if you did not very well in Section 1, Section 2, the second module of the reading and writing, is going to be really easy. That's a bad sign. If they're going to, have you do really well in the first section, then your second section is going to be actually really difficult. You're going to be having all medium and difficult questions. Now, what the SAT is saying is that each and every question is worth exactly 1 point. However, it seems pretty obvious that they're actually going to be applying a weight to things, but we'll see. Because otherwise you could do not very well in the first section and then just destroy everything in the second section and get just as many points as somebody who did really well in the first section and not well in the second section. And that's clearly not the way that they're going to be weighing these, clearly not the way that the standard deviation is going to work out. So we'll see. The College Board has not been very forthcoming about exactly how that scoring is going to be. Meanwhile, when you go to math, there are certain things that have changed, which is now you're going to actually get more time per question. There's going to be 35 minutes and 22 questions. And that brings up the concept of everything on that first section, and of course the second section, but even more importantly in the first section, everything is going to be about making sure you're being accurate, not speeding. Almost everybody I know who took the PSAT in that very first section, they ended up finishing and they had at least 10 minutes to spare. And the reason is because they were used to doing the old SAT and ACT pacing, not the way it is working. And because of that, they missed some of the questions and they didn't get as high a score as they wanted to because they went to the second section. And then they were like, oh, geez, I can't actually get back to where I wanted to be because I missed some of the questions in the first section. Now, they've also gone into the idea of making things much more calculator intensive because of the fact that the old SAT, we didn't get a calculator. The new SAT, the digital SAT, they have one. You can still bring your own calculator. In fact, you can bring multiple calculators. You can bring one of the little scientific ones because you like to use that because you, for some reason, are more familiar with it. And you can also bring a graphing calculator like this one. And of course, what we do is we put programs on this one, and then you can just bring those up and it does like lots of neat and interesting things for you. So you'll have access to multiple calculators, including the one that they have online. Now, the things that have changed is they've gone into much more of XY coordinates, much more of y equals mx plus b with parallel and perpendicular. They've gone much more into the quadratic equation, which has several intricacies to it that people really need to know. But everything that we do is covered in the new math manual. So it's not like they're going to be looking at this and saying, oh, I've never seen anything like this. They'll have seen variations of literally every single type of question. And we don't go over the things that they don't need. So, for example, calculus is not going to be on there, so we're not covering calculus. And what do? We teach them the quickest, easiest way to do everything. So we teach them how to put in their own real numbers, how to use the answer choices to their advantage, how to make sure that they can take the answer choices and use them for back solving. And we also, of course, have computer programs and things that will help them just solve questions immediately. Now, when it comes to the verbal, I want to go through the math. That's generally my specialty. Going back to the verbal, there are certain things that have changed, and I think the verbal changes have been a little bit more drastic. First, the pacing has increased, which means you have less time per question. The way it used to be set up is the way that it is still, in essence, set up on the ACT. On the ACT, you have a reading section, and then you would have 4 different passages, each of those passages with 10 questions for a total of 40. Then, when you were doing the grammar section, there were 5 passages, each with 15 questions, and then you would answer them as you go. And these are actually 2 separate sections. Now, what the SAT has done is they've taken it and made it essentially English language arts. And they've gone into the first module is a mixture of all of the grammar and all of the reading. And the second module is going to be exactly the same thing, but that's the one that's adaptive. Now, what they've also done is they've gone away from having this be passage-based reading. It actually only changes one part of your approach because we've been doing this for 25 years each. And because of that, what we're looking at is the fact that they are covering things that are questions that are asked on the MCAT, which you need to take to get into med school, on the LSAT, which you need to get into law school, on the GRE, which you need to get into graduate school, and the GMAT, which you need to get into business school. So what they've done is they've mixed in some chart, graph, and table questions, which is fine. That's something that they did on the old SAT, but it's also something that they do in an entire section called science on the ACT. But the kinds of questions that they've done is they've changed it to you have a short reading, And then you have a single question about it, but those questions are tending to be, parts are going to be the same as they used to be. Parts are going to be, as I said, taken from different question types that have been used on much more advanced levels of testing. So, for example, one will be asking which of the following, if true, would most strengthen the point the author is making, or what is an assumption that the author is making, or which of the following would weaken the author's argument, or which of the following, if the argument is true, must also be true. But then you're also answering questions where you really have just a plain and simple grammar rule completely out of context because they've taken away the passage. That's okay. What most people don't realize is that the rules of grammar are not nearly as subjective as people have thought they've been. So when you're looking at these types of rules, most people here, especially I'm located on the East Coast, most people have learned MLA, and people think that that's a type of grammar system and it's for documentation, but it's actually also a grammar style, which means, for example, if you're looking at how it is you use commas in MLA, it actually ends up being really using a lot of commas. You're sprinkling those things like croutons on a salad. Whereas the type of grammar system that is used on standardized testing is Chicago Turabian. And with that, there's only 4 times that you use commas ever. And because of that, once you learn those 4 rules, it doesn't matter. Now you no longer need the context of having a passage sitting there in front of you. You can take short little pieces and you can answer questions about it immediately. Now, they've also inserted something that used to be really an entire passage, which was difficult. And now they're taking it and they're putting nice little pieces of things that are in what we would consider Old English, which is English from like the 1800s and the 1900s. And what we do is we literally get the students polished up on certain types of vocabulary that are absolutely coming up because vocabulary has started coming back on the test. So, meanwhile, um, the old methods that we used to use, we've already been doing this. So I hate to think of other companies who are going to have to scramble to figure out exactly what it is they're doing on the new digital SAT. But for us, it's really just that one change from long passages to short passages. And so you approach the questions a little bit differently, but it's the exact same technique. Now, just looking at the idea of SAT and ACT, um, there was a period, obviously, because we had COVID and people were thinking we're not going to be able to take the test. There were people who were testing positive and they would close down testing sites. And some schools went test optional. And what we're actually seeing now is a reverse of that. And there's a reason, multifold. But first, it's because if you have somebody who's from one school, and let's say it's a wonderful school, and somebody who's from a not so wonderful school, they could both look exactly the same on paper. They've taken the same amount of AP classes and they have the same type of GPA, but you're going to find out that indeed they're not the same student. And one of the ways that you determine that is you go, oh, look, they took this standardized test. It was something that everybody took. And this might not be a direct reference to this is exactly how well they're going to do. But the issue you run into is that if you have somebody who is actually doing much better on a standardized testing uh, situation, which is for SAT and ACT, that person tends to do much better in college, especially since some people missed certain things during COVID because you may or may not know this, but some teachers kind of didn't do as hard a work during COVID, and I'm sure that's tempting. The other thing that happened though is that some kids were, doing their learning online or even doing it with a hybrid approach, and there are certain massive concepts that they just missed. I have people who told me, I took grammar or I took literature, or I took geometry or algebra 2 during COVID. And what they're trying to tell you right away is you're pretty much just going to have to reteach that to me, Clark. And I go, you know what? I get it. So, and we start off doing things the easy way, but those are also all the same concepts that are going to be tested on standardized testing. One of the other reasons that standardized testing is making a comeback is because if you look at schools like Dartmouth and MIT, they want people to be the most competitive possible. And if they have somebody who's like, oh, well, hey, I had a 1550 on my SAT or a 35 on my ACT, and they've got somebody else who, they did really well on their grades, but they only had like a 1220, which isn't a bad score. But if they had a 1220, then that's probably not the kind of person that MIT and Dartmouth are going to be looking for. Dartmouth is the first of the Ivies that just came back. And what is it that they're doing? Yeah, they're requiring SAT and ACT again. So, and other schools are doing the same thing. Meanwhile, aside from that, standardized testing also shows that you're able to learn. So what you do is you have to figure out what's on the test. You then have to figure out how to conquer what it is that's on the test. And because of that, it ends up showing that you're actually going to be a good student who's able to come to a school and learn new concepts. And that's going to be adding a new layer of things. And then standardized testing isn't the be all and the end all, but it can be an incredibly important factor, especially if you're looking for a higher order school or you're looking for a big state school. I did admissions at Penn State. And believe me, one of the very first cuts that we use to determine who's in and who's out is standardized testing and their GPA and what types of classes they took. And that is your metrics side of things. And then you add in the other side of things, which is, obviously we can help people come up with their ideas for essays and all the things that they should be putting on their resume. That's another aspect of things. But if you don't have the metric side of things, then it makes it a lot more difficult to really determine, how apt is this student to be able to be a good student at our school. And aside from that, it also honestly just makes it a lot easier. And if you're looking at MIT, they really want you to be able to destroy the math, and not just in school. They want you to be doing it in a standardized testing environment. So with us, what we've been doing for the past 25 years is just deconstructing and completely figuring out the easiest way to crush every standardized test. And we regularly, our average improvement on the SAT is 180 and our average improvement on the ACT is 5. But keep in mind, that also includes people who we've started with who are already at like a 32 and they can't get 5 extra points. They can only get up to to a 36 on the ACT. And that includes the people who are starting at like, a 1470 and they want to get themselves to as close to a 1600 as possible. And then what we do, obviously, is I have a math manual. I walk them through literally every concept they could possibly see on standardized testing. Jeannie walks them through volumes of material, and we get them ready simultaneously for the SAT and for the ACT. Most people seem to have been doing better on the ACT, but what's going to be happening on the SAT? I'm not sure. Nobody's sure, because there's a little bit of experimentation going on, and that's on the part of the College Board who's administering the test. Do they know the exact way that the standard deviation is going to work out? No. Do they know that there's going to be technical glitches because they're adding a new layer of technology? Of course. There's also going to be people who are trying to figure out what's going on at the testing sites. It's going to be really interesting. Now, one of the ways that SAT can deal with that is they have control of the scoring. They can immediately just take that scoring and make it, an easier test. And we've seen that before where people have gone in and, they've been regularly getting, let's say, a 1340, and they walk into one test and they get a 1520. And I think, well, I don't think you actually did that much of an improvement just from the last test you took, and then 3 days later, the test that you took for ETS, which is the Educational Testing Service, the College Board. And so what it means is, they're massaging the numbers. And so it can very much be in your best interest to take each of the tests, the SAT and the ACT, multiple times. Schools don't care if you take it multiple times. That's not an issue. They just want to see that you've been able to reach whatever level it is that they want, whatever hurdle it is that they want to get you over. Do you have any other questions?
Great. Can I
think somebody else joined.
Oh, no, that's just me.
Oh, that's just you. Hi, you.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you please elaborate your approach to English? I know Jeannie does a fantastic job with the passages. Could you tell us more about the kind of passages that come in and how you
Sure.
guys approach it. Yeah.
Sure. You can actually check out a bunch of them. They're available right at College Board. And what you're going to see is they're just a little piece, and it's going to be a very specific chunk of text. And then they're immediately going to ask you a question. And here's the thing that we do. I'm not going to give away all of our secrets, but the idea is they have a very particular type of question. For example, what is the author's main point? What was the purpose of this? How is the author, could the author's argument be strengthened or weakened? Is there a flaw in the author's argument, or whatever it is that they're trying to do? And then they ask grammar questions in there too, which is you have to fix things that are like where places are underlined, and then we'll be like, okay, great, what is it that we should do here? All the answer choices fall into incredibly specific categories. They're the same categories every time. Those haven't changed. And so what we teach them is there's 6 different ways that they make bad answer choices. If you know those 6 different ways, then you can immediately look at them and go, oh, of these 3 answer choices, this one breaks this rule, this one breaks this rule, this one breaks this rule, and then I just make sure that the last one I've got doesn't break any rules, and that ends up being the answer. So you're doing a lot of process of elimination by very specific types of answer choices that they are going to be wrong every time. There's also only 2 ways that they ever write correct answer choices for the critical reading. And as long as it fits those 2 categories of correctness, then you feel really solid. Hey, I can pick that answer. So it's not nearly as subjective as people think. There's got to be reasoning behind it. And all of the answers that they pick have got to be defensible, either according to a style of grammar or according to the conventions of English, including reading and writing. So what we teach them to do is you need to figure out exactly what the question is asking. It's the exact same set of types of questions every time. And then you immediately know exactly what type of answer it is that you're looking for. Get rid of the wrong ones, pick the right one. And it also just speeds you up so much. And that's one of the issues people run into is, they are thinking, hey, I'm going to run out of time. And one of the things that we do is we reorder the passages. If you come across a passage that's really tough, just mark it, save it for later. So we teach not just time management, not just how to manipulate the passage, not just how to deal with the answer choices themselves, but we actually turn you into an absolute robot of a standardized test taker where you're making the same decisions in the same order every time, and it leads you directly to the correct answer. There's no variation in it. So that makes it very, very much easier for the students because they have a system, and it's going to be the same thing for the math. They make the same decisions in the same order every time. And as long as they're making the right decisions, which of course they will be, that's why we practice, then they end up getting just enormous score improvements. We've actually found that the score improvements we're getting for people who are starting and then going on to the digital SAT, they're actually even doing higher than 180. They're doing in the 220 range. But let's see. We need to see what it is they're going to be doing in March, and they get to manipulate and massage the numbers. But yeah, if they're going to be doing exactly what it is that they're showing us on the College Board website, oh, I'm excited. Yeah, I'm ready for this.
Awesome. 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 Are there any parting words that you want to share before we end this great session?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is if you're not sure and you're thinking, well, I think maybe my kid might just want to go to a test optional school. There's nothing wrong with that. What we have found is that people who are going to test optional schools, when they submit their SAT and ACT, they've got way higher admissions rates. And the reason is simple. If you do not submit a standardized test score, the admissions officer is going to assume exactly what it is we are all going to assume, which is you probably didn't do very well on it. Our job is to get that to the point where, nope, that's not the truth. You will be doing well on it. Yeah, that's our job. Yeah, and it's definitely worth it, especially if you want to go to any of the bigger state schools. They are definitely, even if they say it's optional, I can tell you right now, they're really not thinking that way. I had a person who actually had a better GPA, a better resume, but I had another person who had standardized testing and got into the University of Tennessee, and the other person didn't. And so it's pretty clear exactly what it is that they want. And my job is to just make sure that we put together the very best application possible. And, I know one of the things that Joe does is she works with BSMD. Don't worry, we work together on that. I help people with, the essays and all that sort of stuff. But if you're looking to go a BSMD route, do yourself a favor, make sure you take a standardized test. We found very few people last year who didn't take a standardized test actually got in. Yeah, they're really looking for it, and the higher the better.
Amazing.
So those are as competitive. A BSMD program can be as competitive as an IB. There are certain ones that aren't, but they're not as prestigious a program. But if you're looking for any of the prestigious ones, and of course everybody wants to go to as prestigious a one as you can. Yeah, that's going to be as competitive as getting into, Harvard and Yale.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Clark, for
Pleasure.
all the wisdom that you have shared and all that you do with students. I just want to let everybody know that each and every person who's gone to Clark has had a tremendous score increase, and they've all gotten into like exceptional colleges. So thank you so much.
Not a problem. It's our pleasure. We're available. You can reach us at powerforwardtutoring.com and send us a message. We work 5 days a week. We do take Thursdays and Fridays off just so we can, have a little bit of a break. But yeah, we're available on weekends and nights. And we're on the East Coast, but we're flexible with people who are across the country. We tutor people in Hong Kong. That's a hard flexible because we have to be up at 5 a.m, but we'll do it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.